Last week, Julie shared with us some insights of what makes peace the most valuable thing in human history. Notably, we also learned that there are more than 100 armed conflicts happening around the world. These conflicts have caused human displacement, life loss, and loss of business. In the world of business, the stability and peacefulness of any given country is one of the key fundamentals for investments. The impact of violence is undeniable in any given country's economy. Stocks go down at a faster rate. Everything crumbles down, and before you know it, the economy can be brought to its knees. And this tells us the significance of peace. Peace is like a common denominator for anything that supports human life. Therefore, having a peaceable community or kingdom was one of the major components for the flourishing of the people of God in this biblical account. In God's design, peace remains a critical component even in our times today. Peace calms down uneasiness and the tensions to create an enabling environment that sustains human life and the ecosystem. Undeniably, where there is chaos and violence, the people of God suffer. And this affects the design of God's creation. If peace is part of the design of God, then we are right to believe or assert that God suffers with the suffering people and creation. This prophecy of Isaiah that we have read shows us how God is involved in the affairs of God's people. We see God's solidarity and deep concern as God moves into their struggles to bring a message of hope and peace. Isaiah's message shares God's intervention to save God's people. This is a stark reminder that God does not resign, but walks with the people in their struggles and emancipatory journeys. Isaiah announces that not all hope is lost for the people of Israel. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. This metaphor or image brings out something to ponder or think about, especially after the fall of the Davidic kingdom or the division of the kingdom of Israel in this given biblical time. Its reference to Jesse can well be understood if it is connected to the preceding verses and chapters, especially Isaiah chapter 10, verse 20 to 34. But also can be understood if it is connected to the wider biblical perspective. God addresses Israel, or the house of Jacob, to give them hope for a peaceable community. This community is built on God's covenant faithfulness to help the people understand the times they are in, and to give the people a leader from the line of David. Reading Ruth chapter 4, verse 22, we understand that this is a leader who is humble but emerging out of their devastation. Perhaps Isaiah is helping us to picture a peaceable community as one that unifies and reconciles divided people. Perhaps Isaiah is giving us a picture of the inbreaking of God's future into the present to cause a harmonious relationship. All these imaginations can only make sense what it is God is bringing to the people of Israel. It gives us a sense to also understand the primary focus of the prophets. This prophet serves not to assimilate or render the remnants or survivors as collateral damage going forward. Instead, it gives hope to all of them through the promise of a God-fearing and peaceable leader. This leader will be filled by the Spirit of God that offers a new and peaceable community. The Spirit of God will give him wisdom and understanding, counsel and mighty, knowledge and fear of God. This leader shall delight in the Lord, refuse oppression of the poor, and refuse to be indifferent to them. He will not be misled by appearance and rumors, but will offer justice to all and decide with equity for the humble. Who is this leader precisely? Reading Isaiah closely will lead us to two possible conclusions. The first possibility locates the answer within the history of this biblical nation of Israel. For example, Isaiah 37, verse 1 to 20, and 2 Kings 19, verse 1 to 19. Both authors refer to Hezekiah as the promised leader of this community. The second possibility locates this prophecy to be pointing to the Messiah of God, Jesus Christ. And we see Luke in chapter 2, verse 11, capturing this. Biblical commentators further help us to understand this prophecy by lifting up one of the Hebrew words used in this passage. They use the word netzah, translated as shoot in this passage. Netzah is the same Hebrew word from which we get the adjective Nazarene to describe Jesus, as Matthew offers us that description. We can get this from Matthew 2, verse 23. While the first option shows the faithfulness of God's promises in the particular time of history, the second one affirms not only God's promises, but affirms God's critical involvement in birthing a peaceable community through Jesus Christ. As Christians holding on to the blessings and the promises of Advent, we celebrate the coming of God in glory again. However, our celebration is in three ways or threefold. First, we celebrate God's incarnation in history. We remember that Jesus was born, the first coming of Jesus. The second part, we celebrate the presence of God in the present moment. And the third part, we hope in God for the future. And so we look forward to the second coming of Jesus. And this gives us hope. And this hope creates peace and trust. This hope and spirit-filled community is a contradiction to the current intolerance, violence, injustices, and conflicts happening across the world. Peace that Isaiah is talking about comes through and with the promised leader. The purpose of this God-given leader is to establish a community based on the principles of love and peace. He will neither support injustice nor support the wicked. His reign shall run against the interest of the wicked. Instead, his governance will be guided by righteousness and faithfulness. To share vividly the ethical and moral meaning of this community, Isaiah uses surprising images. Yes, they are surprising images because this is not the way life is today. Isaiah talks about predators, wolf, leopard, lions, and the bear, to lie down and graze together with their prey, the lamb, young goat, calf, and cow. Additionally, the nursing child shall play with ferocious animals and deadly snakes. All this seems like a fairy tale. It seems to be too good to be true. But this symbolic meaning serves to convey a peaceable kingdom or community after God's heart. This is a place where hate, violence, discrimination, or extermination has no room. The earth shall be full of God's knowledge as the waters cover the sea. The intimacy of the relationship that exists between God and God's people shall give birth, or should birth, peace and justice. And all the people shall be drawn to God's design of the community through the root of Jesse, the Messiah of God. How did this function for the first readers or recipients? Did they envision it only to serve the future purpose? My reading and reflection suggests that it could have served as a reminder for what God did in the past, what God is doing in the present, and what God will do in the future. In this way, inspiration of a just and peaceable community was a counter discourse and resistance to the current political dispositions. Holding on to this vision interrupted and challenged the corrupt and violent regimes. It signaled that trust in God is paramount rather than trusting foreign political alliances to keep their peace. This brings out a shift in the way we perceive the Advent blessings and the promises of God in general. I am troubled by the idea that peace is perceived as a future event only. But this prophecy should be interpreted as something that holds the dialectical tension of the present and the future together to give birth to a peaceable and harmonious community. This vision of peace interrupts the present forms of violence and injustices. It calls us to cultivate a living hope and peace in our communities to counter the increasing levels of injustices. It calls us to reorder our priorities, moving from self-centeredness and self-interest to generously embracing the other. In this way, we will demonstrate that conflicts, othering, economic and political fights across the world are a contradiction to the best practices of this peaceable community of God. In this peaceable community of God, harm is replaced by care. Violence is replaced by peace. Hate is replaced by love. Isolation is replaced by inclusion. And injustice is replaced by justice. The list can go on and on and on. But Isaiah's prophecy of a future peaceable community led by a God-fearing and peaceful leader still speaks to our needs today. This harmonious and peaceable community assures peace to all the creation, and all the people of God will be drawn to this community through the root of Jesse, the Messiah of God, Jesus Christ. May this be our walk. Peace be with you all. Amen.